Oregon 9-7.
Can I just talk to Mr. McKittrick? I think I know what's going on. Can I talk to Mr. McKittrick, please? I think I know what's going on.
Escorting you to federal authorities in Denver, where you'll be placed under arrest pending indictment for espionage.
WarGames was a $12 million Cold War thriller that grossed $125 million, earned 3 Oscar nominations, and changed U.S. government policy. The director was fired 2 weeks in. The writers were removed from their own film, and the role of the lead scientist was written for someone who was murdered before cameras ever rolled. These are 12 crazy facts you never knew about WarGames. And the bonus? The most powerful person in the world watched it, and it changed something real. Game on. And the stakes are very, very real. Number 1. The film started as a story about a dying scientist based on Stephen Hawking. Hacking wasn't in it at all. The film that introduced a generation to the concept of hacking did not begin as a story about hacking. It began as a story about a dying genius and a rebellious kid. Co-writer Lawrence Lasker was watching a documentary featuring Stephen Hawking when the original concept came to him. He was captivated by a specific predicament, that Hawking's work might one day lead him to solve the mysteries of the universe. And yet, his progressive ALS might prevent him from ever being able to share that knowledge. The solution Lasker imagined was a successor, a juvenile delinquent, someone whose problem was that nobody recognized how smart he was, who could carry the legacy forward. Lasker took the idea to Walter F. Parks, and they combined it with Parks's own concept about a misunderstood teenage genius. They titled the result, The Genius. No computers, no hacking, no nuclear war. Everything changed when the writers met Peter Schwartz from the Stanford Research Institute. Schwartz introduced them to a subculture forming around personal computing. Bright kids experimenting with systems in ways nobody had defined yet. He told them SRI was running computerized war games for the military. The connection formed immediately. The script became WarGames. Number 2. John Lennon was supposed to play Dr. Falcon and was murdered while the script was in development. As the script evolved, the character of Dr. Stephen Falcon, the reclusive genius who built WOPR and named it after his dead son, remained central. The writers developed Falcon's look and manner around 2 figures, Stephen Hawking and John Lennon. Parks described Lennon as a kind of spiritual cousin to Hawking, a figure whose public persona carried the same combination of radical intelligence and cultural remove. The writers approached Lennon via a mutual contact. He seemed keen on discussing the idea. In December 1980, while the script was still in development, Lennon was shot and killed outside his apartment building in New York. The role went to British actor John Wood. The character had also been written as wheelchair-bound like Hawking. Director Martin Brest vetoed it, feeling the image would be too reminiscent of Dr. Strangelove. The wheelchair was removed. The person originally imagined for the role was gone before cameras ever rolled. Number 3. The director was fired after 2 weeks and went on to make Beverly Hills Cop. Martin Brest spent a year and a half developing WarGames before production began. His vision was darker than the studio wanted, the lead older, the tone more serious, the ending potentially one where nuclear war actually broke out. United artists watched the footage and were not impressed. Approximately 2 to 3 weeks in Brest was removed due to creative differences. John Badham, director of Saturday Night Fever, was brought in as replacement. Broderick and Sheedy were convinced they were about to be replaced as well. Badham described the 2 leads as stiff as boards when he arrived. He ran races with them around the soundstage on his first day, lost, and sang The Happy Wanderer to the crew as a forfeit. Roughly 10% of the finished film was directed by Brest. The remaining 90% was shot by Badham. Brest's next film after being fired was Beverly Hills Cop, the highest-grossing film of 1984. Number 4. The original writers were fired from their own film and then rehired. Losing the director was not the only upheaval. The writers who created WarGames were removed from it before Brest was ever fired. Lasker and Parks had negotiated co-producer status, giving them the right to sit in on script meetings. What it did not give them was the ability to make changes. Every revision they proposed was rejected. Eventually, they were banned from the meetings entirely, and their co-producer status was revoked, removed from the project they had built while Brest reworked the material with Waylon Green, Oscar-nominated co-writer of The Wild Bunch. When Badham came aboard, he brought Lasker and Parks back immediately. The final script was a layered document. The original draft, Brest-era revisions, Badham-era revisions, and additional scenes by Tom Mankiewicz, who had written Superman and multiple James Bond films. The 2 writers fired from their own film returned to finish it. At the 56th Academy Awards, they received an Oscar nomination for Best Original Screenplay. Number 5, the NORAD set cost $1 million and was the most expensive ever built.
This rather large room here is the command center for NORAD. No picture taking. These screens you see in front of you connected to our satellites and missile tracking stations throughout the country.
The most visually striking element of WarGames, the vast illuminated NORAD command center that anchors the film's final act, was built entirely from imagination. Parks and Lasker had visited the actual NORAD facility in Colorado during research. They were not allowed inside the command center. The trip gave them a sense of the scale and significance of the place, but no usable visual reference for what they needed to put on screen. Production designer Jeffrey Kirkland built the set based on photographs of early military tabulating machines and metal furniture used by the U.S. military in the 1940s and 1950s, extrapolating forward to what a 1983 military supercomputer installation might plausibly look like. The result cost $1 million, and making it the most expensive single set ever constructed in film at the time. The large video wall used to display tactical situations employed a new super bright design that enabled the displays to be filmed live, meaning the actors were actually seeing the animations on screen in real time, rather than reacting to blank monitors with effects added in post-production. Director Badham noted on the DVD commentary that the actual NORAD command center is nowhere near as elaborate as the movie version. His description of the set, NORAD's wet dream of itself. Number 6, Matthew Broderick practiced Galaga for 2 months and admitted the typing was an afterthought.
You want to take this over? I gotta go.
Sure.
Playing a teenage computer genius required 2 distinct skills, typing and arcade gaming. The production took both seriously. Matthew Broderick took one of them seriously. The studio delivered Galaxian and Galaga arcade machines directly to Broderick's home so he could practice for the introductory scene where his character plays in an arcade. He had 2 months. The machines were there every day. He practiced. The typing was a different matter. The role required Broderick to appear proficient at a keyboard. David Lightman was a hacker who spent hours at his computer, and the camera would be on his hands. The filmmakers considered it important enough to specifically ask him to learn. Broderick's recollection of his priorities. That seemed the most important part of preparing for the movie to me, that I did practice. The typing, not so much. The arcade scene works. Broderick looks genuinely experienced at the machine. Comfortable, relaxed, the way someone who has been playing since childhood looks when they sit down at a cabinet they know well. Whether the typing holds up to scrutiny is a separate question that the film's pace largely prevents the audience from asking. Number 7. The film premiered at Cannes, and opening weekend audiences stood up and cheered at the final line. WarGames screened at the 1983 Cannes Film Festival before its U.S. release, appearing as the closing night film of the festival. It opened domestically on June 3, 1983. The timing was significant. The Cold War was not an abstraction in the summer of 1983. Nuclear anxiety was embedded in everyday American life in a way that is difficult to fully communicate from the outside. A background dread that most people had learned to manage without ever fully resolving. WarGames put that dread on screen in the form of a teenage boy who accidentally initiated it from his bedroom. Director Badham noted that during opening weekend screenings, audiences broke into spontaneous applause when WOPR delivered its final conclusion. A strange game. The only winning move is not to play. A line written for a fictional supercomputer, delivered at the end of a film about the world almost ending, to audiences sitting in dark theaters in a country pointing nuclear weapons at another country pointing nuclear weapons back. The applause was not for the movie. It was for the sentiment. Audiences recognized it as the thing they had all been quietly thinking and had not had a way to say out loud. The film grossed $125 million worldwide against a $12 million budget and was the 5th highest grossing film in the United States that year. Number 8, real hackers were invited onto set as advisors. The accuracy of WarGames was not accidental. During research, Parks and Lasker had made genuine connections with real hackers and computer security experts, becoming friends with several of them and absorbing their knowledge into the script. The tricks the real hackers shared with the writers were written directly into the film. The idea of setting the number of players in Joshua's tic-tac-toe game to 0, the move that ultimately saves the world, came from a real hacker during the research period. When Badham came on as director, he extended this approach. He invited what Wired later described as a small army of computer whizzes onto set to advise on technical accuracy throughout production. The result was a film that felt authentic to the people who were actually living inside the world it depicted, which was a small but growing number of people in 1983 and an enormous number of people by the time the film's cultural legacy had fully developed. The hacker conference DEF CON, one of the largest and most prestigious cybersecurity gatherings in the world, was founded in the 1990s and named directly after the film's references to military DEF CON threat levels. Google hosted a 25th anniversary screening of the film, with the company's co-founder calling it a key movie of a generation, especially for those of us who got into computing. Number 9. Ali Sheedy's role was originally tiny. It expanded because her chemistry with Broderick was too good to waste.
Well, I've been thinking, a thing with my braid. Can you still change it?
Jennifer Mack was not supposed to be a significant presence in WarGames. She was written as a small supporting part, a classmate, a peripheral figure whose screen time reflected that. Then Badham watched Broderick and Sheedy together. The chemistry was immediate and natural in a way the script had not anticipated. Badham began expanding Jennifer's role as production continued, not through any planned revision, but through a rolling process of recognizing what was working and writing toward it. Scenes were rewritten to include her. New scenes were added. The relationship between David and Jennifer became a thread running through the entire film, rather than a minor subplot. Sheedy ended up in scenes she had originally been written out of entirely. The writers, rehired after being removed from the project, expanded her presence throughout as it became clear the film's emotional core was located in the dynamic between the two leads. The character who was supposed to be a small part became one of the two faces on the poster. Number 10. The U.S. Air Force actively opposed the film's release. Not everyone in the national security establishment reacted to WarGames the way Reagan did. The Air Force had objected to the film before it was ever released. Officers raised concerns about factual accuracy and what those inaccuracies might communicate to the public. The film combined several separate military organizations under NORAD's authority in ways that bore no relation to how the actual chain of command operated. NORAD does not have authority to order military defense operations. People, not computers, make executive orders. The Air Force's position was direct. The film would add to concerns that the world can be plunged into an accidental nuclear war. The studio proceeded anyway. Audiences stood up and cheered at the final line. Reagan watched it at Camp David and ordered a national security review. The Joint Chiefs came back a week later to say the premise was not just plausible, it was worse than depicted. The Air Force had been worried about the wrong thing. Number 11. A real hacker group broke into Los Alamos the same year, and the press called it the WarGames case. WarGames opened in June 1983. Later that year, a hacker group known as the 414s penetrated computer systems at Los Alamos National Laboratory, one of the most sensitive research facilities in the United States. Journalists covering the incident reached for the most recognizable frame of reference available. They called it the WarGames case. A film some had dismissed as implausible had become the press shorthand for a real security breach at a nuclear research facility within months of its release. The speculation that followed was pointed. If a group of teenagers with limited resources could penetrate Los Alamos, how much of the film's scenario was actually fiction? The answer the Joint Chiefs had already delivered to Reagan, that the problem was worse than the movie depicted, was becoming visible in real time. Number 12. John Wood plays two roles in the film.
They believe you can win a nuclear war, but there can be acceptable losses.
John Wood plays Dr. Stephen Falcon on screen, the reclusive genius who created WOPR, named it after his deceased son Joshua, and retreated to an island to wait for the nuclear war he considered inevitable. He also plays Joshua, the voice of the computer, asking, "Shall we play a game?" running every nuclear scenario to its logical conclusion, and delivering the film's last line is John Wood, the scientist who built the machine and the machine itself. Same actor, same film. Badham had initially considered a child's voice for Joshua, connecting the computer to Falcon's dead son. He decided the voice should feel closer to Falcon himself and asked Wood to record all of Joshua's dialogue backwards. The reasoning? Reading backwards forces each word to land in complete isolation, the way a computer assembles language from individual sounds rather than flowing through sentences like a human. The man playing the scientist who built the machine became the voice of the machine, recorded in reverse, word by word, to sound like something that had never been human. Bonus, Ronald Reagan watched it at Camp David and based a real policy decision on it. Producer Lasker arranged for Reagan, a family friend, to watch the film at Camp David during opening weekend. Reagan was fascinated. The following week, he stopped a meeting about nuclear negotiations with the Soviet Union and gave everyone in the room a full breakdown of the plot. Then he asked directly, could something like this actually happen? General John W. Vesey Jr., then chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, came back a week later. Mr. President, the problem is much worse than you think. Reagan ordered a full national security review. Within 18 months, that review produced NSDD 145, the first presidential directive on computer security in American history. A $12 million film about a teenager who accidentally almost started World War III produced the first serious governmental response to the concept of cyber warfare. The only winning move, as it turned out, was to take the game seriously. WarGames was never just a movie. It was a warning that arrived early enough to matter. A story about a teenager, a computer, and the gap between a game and the end of the world. It launched 2 careers, changed how a president thought about national security, and gave a generation its first language for the digital age before the digital age had fully arrived. Drop a comment and tell us which film we should cover next, because some stories don't just reflect the moment they were made in. They reach forward and describe the world that's still coming. Thanks for watching.